He didn't lose her all at once. He lost her slowly, every time he chose silence over honesty. Elena Whitman had learned to make her life small in all the right ways. Not small like surrender, small like precision, the kind of quiet that didn't invite attention, the kind of routine that didn't leave fingerprints. It was a discipline, not a sadness, most days. Tonight, the hallway outside her apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and someone's burnt dinner. Elena balanced a paper bag against her hip, her keys already threaded between two fingers the way she preferred. Practical, discreet, automatic. She turned the lock slowly, listening to the soft tumblers shift. She hadn't always listened. She used to enter rooms like she belonged to them, shoulders back, laughter ready, trust easy. That version of her had been expensive. Inside, the apartment greeted her with its familiar calm. Warm lamplight, a clean counter, the low hum of the refrigerator. She shut the door with the quietest click she could manage and set the bag down. The city outside her windows ran on its own clock. Headlights glided along the street below. A distant siren rose and fell without urgency. The building across the way reflected her living room like a faint mirror. Her lamp, her silhouette, her life contained behind glass. Elena hung her coat, rinsed her hands, and moved through her evening the way she always did, an unremarkable sequence designed to keep her from thinking too long about what she used to be. Tea. A shower, a few pages of a book that wasn't truly holding her attention. She told herself it was enough. In the bedroom, she slid into a soft sweater and leggings, twisted her hair into a loose knot, and padded back into the living room. She didn't turn on the overhead lights. The lamps were kinder. Lamps made shadows that felt intentional. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. A text from Marisol. "You home?" Elena stared at it, thumb hovering. "Yes," she typed, then deleted it. Replaced it with something lighter, easier. "Just got in. Long day." She set the phone down without sending anything else. Marisol had a way of hearing what Elena didn't say, and Elena wasn't in the mood to be understood, not tonight. She poured hot water over a tea bag, watched the steam curl into the air, and let the warmth settle in her palms. The quiet in the apartment was gentle. Safe, and then, like a thread pulled taut, she felt it. Not a sound, not a sight, a change. Elena's gaze drifted to the window. The street below was the same. The cars were the same. The city kept moving with its indifferent rhythm. But the feeling pressed at the back of her neck all the same. An old instinct she hadn't invited back into her body. She held still. In the glass, she could see a faint outline of her living room behind her. She could see her own face, softened by the lamplight. She could see the reflected edge of the hallway leading to her bedroom. Nothing moved. She exhaled carefully, not wanting to feed the sensation with panic. The mind could manufacture danger as easily as it could manufacture hope. Still, her hand found her phone and unlocked it without thinking. No missed calls, no new messages. Elena stepped closer to the window, tea forgotten on the counter. She didn't press her face to the glass. She didn't make it obvious. She only lowered her eyes toward the street, the way a person might casually look out before closing curtains. Across the street, a dark sedan sat at the curb. It could have been anyone. The city was full of cars that looked like that. Clean, expensive, anonymous. But Elena noticed details in the way other people noticed weather. The car's windows were too dark. The engine was running, but the headlights were off. It wasn't parked like someone who lived nearby. It was positioned like someone waiting. Her throat tightened, not with fear exactly, but with recognition. She had spent years persuading herself that recognition was pointless, that whatever world she had stepped out of no longer had a door open for her, that the past stayed in its lane as long as you stayed in yours. Elena took a slow sip of tea to force her hands steady. The sedan didn't move. She set her cup down and reached for the curtains. Halfway there, her phone buzzed again. This time, the screen lit with a number she didn't have saved. No name, no photo, no warning. Just 10 digits and the weight of what they might mean. Her first impulse was to let it ring itself into silence. She didn't owe anyone access to her voice. She didn't owe anyone proof she was home. But she stood frozen long enough to realize her heartbeat had changed. Less startled, more measured. Like her body already knew who was on the other end. Elena stared at the phone until it stopped. Then it buzzed again, immediately. She let it ring twice, 3 times. On the fourth ring, she answered without lifting it to her ear, put it on speaker and held it at arm's length like it could stain her. Hello. There was a pause on the line, a quiet breath that sounded controlled, familiar, dangerous in its restraint. Then a voice, calm as a closed door. Elena? Her name in his mouth didn't sound like an invitation. It sounded like a claim he no longer had the right to make. Elena's chest went tight, not because she was falling back into something, but because she was seeing the shape of it clearly. She forced her voice into steadiness. You shouldn't be calling me. Another pause, as if he was deciding what honesty would cost. I know, Luca DeSantis said. I'm going to anyway. Elena's gaze flicked back to the window. The sedan still waited at the curb, engine idling like patience. Are you outside? She asked, hating that she already believed the answer. I'm nearby, he said. Nearby was a word that sounded harmless, but Elena understood the language of men like Luca. Nearby meant close enough to intervene, close enough to control outcomes, close enough to remind you what they were capable of. You don't get to do that, she said quietly. Not anymore. The line went silent for a beat, long enough for Elena to hear the city breathing behind the glass. Then Luca spoke again, his voice lower. Someone else is looking for you. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. Who? I don't want you scared, he said, as if fear was something he could prevent with tone alone. I'm already not stupid, Elena replied. Tell me, a soft exhale, not regret, not apology, decision. They think you have something, Luca said, and they're going to come close enough to find out. Elena stared at the dark sedan below, at the way it sat perfectly still, and felt the boundary she'd built around her life begin to crack. Not because she wanted him back, because the past didn't need her permission to return. And you, Elena said, voice steady by sheer will, are you here to warn me or to manage me? In the pause that followed, she could almost see him on the other end, still composed, choosing every word like a weapon. I'm here, Luca said at last, because I should have done this years ago. Elena closed her eyes just for a second. Outside, the sedan's brake lights flared, then went dark again. And Elena understood, with a clarity that made her stomach drop, that leaving hadn't made her invisible. It had only made her easier to watch. They met on neutral ground. Elena chose the place deliberately, a restaurant too public for raised voices, too modest for power displays. No private rooms, no favors called in, just wood tables, low lighting, and the quiet murmur of other people living ordinary lives. She arrived 10 minutes early and took a seat near the window, not because she wanted to see him coming, but because she needed to see a way out. When Luca walked in, the room shifted. Not dramatically. No heads turned. No one whispered. But Elena felt it in the same way she felt weather change, subtle pressure, a tightening in the air. He looked older, not weaker, more contained. His hair was threaded with grey at the temples, his suit dark and unadorned. No excess, no statement pieces. If she hadn't known better, she might have thought he was trying not to be noticed. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Luca stopped a few feet from the table. He didn't sit. He didn't reach for her chair. He waited. Elena didn't stand either. This isn't a reunion, she said calmly, so don't treat it like one. I'm aware, he replied. His voice was steady, lower than she remembered. May I sit? She nodded once. They sat across from each other, hands on the table, but not touching. The distance felt intentional, like a boundary neither of them wanted to test yet. A server approached. Elena ordered tea. Luca asked for water, no alcohol. Another choice, she noticed. When they were alone again, silence settled between them, not the old comfortable kind, but something taut and expectant. You said you'd tell me everything, Elena began. I said I'd tell you the truth, Luca corrected. Those are not always the same thing. Her mouth curved slightly, humorless. You're not in a position to negotiate language, he inclined his head. Fair, Luca folded his hands together, resting them on the table. You left because I never made you visible. Elena blinked. The directness caught her off guard. I left because I was tired of disappearing in rooms I helped build. Yes, he said. That. She studied him carefully. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't explaining himself away. That was new. You thought silence was protection, Elena said. I believed that the less you knew, the safer you were, Luca replied. In my world, information is leverage. And you leveraged me, she said quietly. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I structured my life to keep you insulated. Accounts, shells, distance. I told myself that if no one could trace you, no one could use you. And you never once asked if I wanted that. No. The word landed between them, heavy and unadorned. Elena looked past him for a moment, watching a couple at another table lean toward each other, their heads nearly touching. Ordinary intimacy. Earned, uncomplicated. I knew things were wrong, she said. I felt it. The gaps, the way conversations stopped when I walked in, the decisions already made. I thought you trusted me. I trusted you, Elena replied. That's why it hurt. Luca's fingers flexed slightly, then stilled. I mistook your silence for acceptance. You mistook it for permission, she said. The server returned with their drinks, interrupting the moment. Elena waited until he left before continuing. You didn't just keep me uninformed, she said. You kept me small. You let me believe my instincts were overreactions. That was never my intention. It was the result, Elena replied. Intent doesn't undo impact. Luca nodded once, as if marking a point he couldn't argue away. You're right. The ease with which he said it unsettled her again. Apologies were not currency he had ever spent freely. There are people who believe you have access to certain financial records, he continued, not because you ever touched them, but because your name was used to distance assets. At the time, it was the safest option. For you, Elena said. For you, he corrected. And for me. She leaned back slightly, folding her arms. You don't get to rewrite that now. I'm not trying to, Luca said. I'm telling you because those structures are being examined, quietly, methodically. By who? Federal investigators, he said. And others who don't wear badges. Elena felt the familiar chill slide down her spine. Not fear exactly, but calculation. So I'm a liability. You're a target, Luca replied. Not by choice, by proximity. She exhaled slowly. And your solution? I don't have one yet, he said. That's why I'm here. The honesty sat between them, raw and uncomfortable. I'm not moving in with you, Elena said immediately. I'm not disappearing, and I'm not letting you manage this the way you used to. I wouldn't ask that, Luca replied. She raised an eyebrow. You're already asking? No, he said. I'm offering transparency. The word felt fragile in his mouth. You tell me everything, Elena said. Every risk, every name, every contingency, and I decide what I do with my life. Yes, and if I walk away? Luca met her gaze without flinching. Then I let you. The statement carried more weight than any promise he'd ever made. Elena studied him for a long moment, searching for the familiar need to control, to contain. She found it, but layered now with something else. Restraint, maybe even fear. Staying, she said finally, doesn't mean forgiving. I know. And listening, she continued, doesn't mean agreeing. I know that too, she nodded once, decision settling in her chest. Then we start with the truth, all of it. Luca reached into his jacket and placed a slim folder on the table. He didn't push it toward her, he simply let it sit between them. Elena, he said quietly, there are things in here that will change how you see me. She placed her hand on the folder, feeling the weight of it beneath her palm. I already see you, she replied. This just tells me whether I stay. Outside, the light shifted as evening began to settle. Inside, neither of them moved. The distance between them remained, but for the first time in years, it was honest. Elena didn't open the folder right away. She took it with her when she left the restaurant, tucked under her arm like something fragile and dangerous at the same time. Luca hadn't followed. He hadn't offered to walk her home or insisted on a car. That restraint felt intentional, new. It didn't earn him trust, but it registered. At home, she placed the folder on the kitchen table and stood over it for a long moment. The apartment was quiet in the way it was just before dawn, when the city hadn't decided what it would be yet. Elena poured herself a glass of water, drank half of it, then sat. Inside the folder were copies, not originals. Bank pathways, trust structures, timelines, names she recognized and others she didn't. What she understood immediately was not the mechanics. Those would take time, but the pattern. Her name appeared like a hinge, not central, not powerful, strategic, a buffer. Elena leaned back in her chair, breath shallow. She read slowly, forcing herself not to skim, not to jump ahead. Years unfolded on paper with a calmness that felt obscene. Decisions made quietly, protections layered without her knowledge, opportunities rerouted, risks diverted. Her life adjusted around someone else's calculations. By the time the sky outside her window lightened, Elena felt something in her settle. Not anger, not shock, but clarity. The kind that didn't ask permission. Her phone buzzed at 8:30. "We should talk," Luca texted. "We are," she replied. "Tonight. My place. 7. There was a pause before his response. "I'll be there." She spent the day moving through the world with a steadiness that surprised her. At work, she listened more than she spoke. She took notes she might never need. She smiled when required. All the while, the truth sat quietly in her chest, heavy but stable. At 6:45, Elena set 2 glasses on the counter. No wine. No ceremony. Just water. When Luca arrived, he stood in her doorway like someone entering a space he hadn't earned. He didn't look around. He waited. "Come in," she said. He did, removing his jacket and setting it carefully on the back of a chair, as if respecting the room meant something now. She gestured toward the kitchen table. The folder lay open, pages spread like evidence. "You used my name," Elena said, not looking at him, repeatedly. "Yes." "You rerouted money through entities connected to me?" "Yes." "You adjusted my career path so I wouldn't be in rooms where questions were asked." He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was even. "I influenced outcomes. That's a yes." "Yes." Elena finally met his gaze. "You decided what risks I was allowed to face." "I decided which ones would kill you," Luca said. The words were quiet, measured. They didn't ask for understanding. Elena's hands curled into fists on the table. "You don't get to define living that way." "I know," he said. "I know now." "That's not enough," she replied. "You didn't just protect me. You edited me. You took choices away before I knew they existed." Luca nodded once. "I did." The admission hung between them, unadorned. No defense, no justification. "I need you to understand something," Elena said. "This isn't about money or danger. This is about consent." He didn't interrupt. "You loved me," she continued. "But you loved me like a fixed point, something to build around, not something to consult." "I was wrong," Luca said, "and I can't undo it." "No," Elena agreed. "You can't." She stood, pacing once, then stopping in front of him. "But you can stop doing it." He met her eyes. "Tell me how." The words were simple. They carried weight. "You pull my name out of everything," she said. "Every structure, every account, every contingency. That will expose me." "That's not my problem," Elena replied. "You also disclose everything you've done in my name to the investigators who already know enough to be dangerous." Luca's jaw tightened. "That puts my entire operation at risk." "Yes," she said calmly. "That's the point." Silence stretched, thick and deliberate. Elena waited. She didn't fill it. She didn't soften her stance. Finally, Luca spoke. "If I do this, there is no going back." "There hasn't been for years," Elena replied. He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "All right." The word landed differently this time, not like agreement, like consequence. "There's something else," he said. "If your name is removed, the protection it offered disappears. I don't want protection that costs me my agency. You may be watched," he said. "Not by me, by others." Elena's expression didn't change. "I've been watched before." "Yes," Luca said quietly. "By me." The acknowledgement stung more than she expected. She turned away, steadying herself against the counter. "When I left," she said, voice controlled, "I thought I was choosing freedom. I didn't realize how much of my life was still being managed from a distance." "I thought distance was mercy," Luca said. "It was control," Elena replied. Another pause. Then Luca reached into his pocket and placed his phone on the table, screen up. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Ending things," he said. "Tonight. You don't dismantle an empire with a phone call." "No," Luca agreed. "But you start." He unlocked the phone and began typing, his movements precise. Elena watched, heart steady, as messages were sent, not coded, not evasive. "Direct. What you're doing," she said slowly, "will cost you. Yes. Power," she added. "Yes." He looked up at her then, eyes clear. "I won't keep anything that requires me to erase you." The words landed, not as romance, but as accountability. Elena felt something shift, not toward forgiveness, not yet, but toward balance. "This doesn't mean I stay," she said. "I know. It means I don't leave tonight." Luca nodded, accepting the boundary without reaching for more. Outside, the city settled into evening. Inside, the truth had finally tipped the scales. For the first time, Elena wasn't reacting to his world. She was redefining the terms of her own. The first thing Elena noticed was the quiet, not the absence of sound. The city never truly slept, but the absence of interruption. No calls, no sudden arrivals, no sense of being anticipated, the kind of quiet that felt earned rather than imposed. It unsettled her more than the noise ever had. Days passed, then a week. Luca kept his distance exactly as promised. No messages unless they were necessary. No updates framed as concern. When he did reach out, it was precise, factual, restrained. Your name has been removed from 3 structures, 2 more in progress. Investigators have acknowledged receipt. There may be attention, not from me. Each message landed like proof of work rather than reassurance. Elena appreciated that. She didn't thank him. Thank him. Gratitude would have implied approval, and she wasn't there yet. They met again on a Sunday afternoon, not planned so much as inevitable. Elena had agreed to walk through a public park. Wide paths, families nearby, nothing enclosed. Luca arrived without an entourage, dressed casually enough to blend in, though blending had never been his strength. They walked side by side, not close enough to brush hands. You look tired, Elena observed. Luca nodded. I am. Good, she said, not unkindly. A corner of his mouth lifted, brief and wry. I deserve that. They passed a bench where an older couple sat in silence, their shoulders touching, neither speaking. Elena noticed the ease of it, the history implied without being displayed. This is costing you more than you expected, she said. Yes, Luca replied, because I underestimated how much of my authority depended on silence. They stopped near a stand of trees, the city muffled just enough to allow space for honesty. I spent years believing power was control, Luca continued. Information withheld, decisions centralized, risk managed. And now, Elena prompted, and now I'm learning that power without consent corrodes everything it touches, he said, including the person holding it. Elena studied him. He wasn't performing remorse. He was cataloguing loss. People are pushing back, he added, questioning decisions I used to make alone. That's what happens when you stop ruling by fear, Elena said. I never thought of it as fear. That doesn't surprise me. They resumed walking. There's something else, Luca said. Something I should have told you earlier. Elena slowed but didn't stop. If you say that again, make sure it's worth it, he exhaled. When you left, I let you believe it was clean. It wasn't, Elena replied calmly. I know. I made it easier than it should have been, he said. Not because I wanted you gone, because if you'd had to fight to stay, I would have had to admit what I was asking of you. Elena stopped walking. The truth of it settled in her chest, heavy and precise. So you let me go, she said slowly, to avoid hearing me say no. Yes. Not because he feared rejection, but because he feared accountability. Elena looked at him for a long moment. That's the first thing you've said that actually hurts. I know, Luca replied quietly. They stood there, the path stretching ahead, behind. No rush to resolve it. I'm not here to punish you, Elena said finally, but I won't protect you from the consequences of your choices. I wouldn't ask you to, Luca said. I've spent my life doing that for myself. She turned and continued walking. He followed. Later, they parted without ceremony. No embrace. No promise of what came next. That night, Elena sat alone in her living room, the lamps low, the windows open to the sounds of the street. She thought about the version of Luca she'd loved, the man who was so certain, so capable, so immovable, and she thought about the man she was seeing now. Still powerful, still dangerous in some ways, but willing, finally, to be questioned. Her phone buzzed close to midnight. There's increased pressure, Luca texted, from inside. That's what happens when control loosens, she replied. Yes, he wrote. Then, after a pause, I wanted you to know before you heard it elsewhere. Elena stared at the message. This time she typed back without hesitation. Thank you for telling me. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. She set the phone down and stood, moving to the window. The street below was ordinary. Cars, pedestrians, lights spilling from storefronts. No dark sedans, no watchers she could sense. For the first time in years, her life felt unsupervised. And somewhere in the city, a man who had built his world on certainty was learning how fragile authority became once it was no longer absolute. Elena didn't know yet whether that change would be enough. But she knew this. Power had finally stopped speaking for her. And that alone shifted everything. Elena agreed to stay only after she rewrote the terms. Not allowed, not ceremonially, but clearly enough that there could be no misunderstanding, especially not from a man who had spent years interpreting silence in his favor. She didn't move in with Luca. She didn't share an address. She didn't give him keys or schedules or access, dressed up as concern. What she did agree to was proximity. Temporary, conditional, observable. Luca arranged a short-term residence for her in a quiet building overlooking the river, secure but not hidden, staffed but not controlled. When she toured it, he stayed several steps behind, answering only what she asked, offering nothing extra. That restraint mattered more than any gesture. The first night she stayed there, Elena barely unpacked. She placed her toothbrush in the bathroom, her book on the nightstand, and left the rest in the suitcase. A reminder to both of them that this was not a return. It was an evaluation. Luca arrived just before 8, as agreed. No earlier, no later. He didn't knock. He rang the bell. She noticed that too. "You can come in," Elena said through the intercom, then buzzed him up. When he entered, he looked around once and then focused on her, hands visible, posture neutral. "This is not a reconciliation," she said immediately. "I understand," Luca replied, "and I'm not here to help you fix what you broke." "I wouldn't ask you to." She nodded, satisfied. "Then we're clear." They shared the space carefully, sat on opposite ends of the couch, spoke without overlap, left silences intact instead of rushing to fill them. It was strange being alone together without an agenda. For years, their time had been purposeful, strategic, charged. Now it was measured, almost ordinary, almost. "I'm being challenged," Luca said at one point, not as complaint but as fact, by people who used to defer. "That's what accountability looks like," Elena replied. "It's uncomfortable." "Yes," he said, "it is." She studied him as he spoke, noting the tension he no longer concealed, the fatigue, the way he no longer softened difficult truths for effect. "You could stop," she said. "You could pull back, take control again." Luca didn't hesitate. "I won't." "Because of me? Because of what it cost you," he answered. "And because I don't want to be that man anymore." The words landed quietly. Elena didn't let them move her. Later, when the evening thinned into night, Luca stood to leave without prompting. "I'll go," he said. Elena didn't stop him. That mattered too. At the door, he paused, not turning, not asking. "Thank you," he said, "for staying." She considered the word. "I'm staying present," she corrected, "not committed." "Yes," Luca said, "I know." After he left, Elena stood alone in the living room, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade down the hallway. She waited for the familiar tightening in her chest, the fear of being left, of being abandoned to uncertainty. It didn't come. What came instead was something quieter, more dangerous. Hope, stripped of fantasy. Days settled into a rhythm. Luca came and went, never assuming. Conversations deepened but didn't soften. When Elena asked questions, she got answers, even when they were inconvenient, even when they exposed his vulnerabilities. One evening, as they stood side by side in the kitchen, not touching, she said, "You know this might not end the way you want." "I know," Luca replied. "That's part of staying honest. And if I leave, I'll let you," he said, without watching. She turned to him then, really looked at him. "Do you understand what that costs you?" "Yes." "And you're still here?" "Yes." The word wasn't defiant. It wasn't pleading. It was chosen. That night, Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the city lights shifting faintly through the curtains. She thought about the years she had spent shrinking herself to fit into someone else's calculations, and she thought about what it meant to stay now, not because it was safe, not because it was familiar, but because the truth was finally being spoken without conditions. Staying without promises was harder than leaving had ever been. But it was also the first time she felt entirely herself in his presence. Not claimed, not managed, simply seen. And in that fragile, uncertain space, Elena realized the question was no longer whether Luca could change. It was whether she was willing to choose him, knowing exactly who he was. The answer wasn't there yet, but for the first time it was hers to decide. The choice didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, over time, in the way Luca no longer entered rooms as if they belonged to him, in the way he waited, not for permission but for confirmation, in the way the truth stopped feeling like a performance and started feeling like a habit. Elena noticed it in small things. He no longer positioned himself between her and the door. He no longer framed information to soften its impact. He no longer assumed proximity meant access. Most importantly, he no longer treated her presence as proof she would stay. That was new. The night everything settled, it was raining, not dramatically, just enough to darken the streets and blur the city into soft reflections. Elena stood at the window of the river apartment, watching the lights ripple across the water, her reflection faint and steady in the glass. Luca sat at the table behind her, reviewing documents. Not hiding them, not guarding them, just working. "You don't have to stay tonight," she said without turning around. "I know," he replied. "You don't have to stay at all." Another pause. Then gently, "I know that too." She turned, studying him carefully. No tension in his shoulders, no calculation in his eyes, just presence. "I've been offered a position," Elena said. "Out of state." Luca closed the folder in front of him but didn't reach for her. "When?" "In a month." "That's soon." "Yes." He nodded once, absorbing it. "Do you want it?" The question mattered more than the answer. "I do," Elena said. "Because it's mine, because no one arranged it, because it moves me forward." "Then you should take it," Luca said. The words were immediate, unqualified. She searched his face for hesitation, for strategy, for the familiar instinct to contain. She found none. "And us?" she asked. He met her gaze evenly. "If you choose to leave, I'll respect it. If you choose to stay, it will be because you want to, not because I asked." Elena felt something release in her chest, not relief, not triumph, but recognition. This was the moment, not the declarations, not the sacrifices, not the dismantling of power structures. This. She walked to the table and rested her hands on its edge. "I spent years believing love required endurance," she said. "That if I stayed quiet long enough, it would become safe." Luca didn't interrupt. "I don't want to endure anymore," she continued. "I want to choose." He stood slowly, careful not to crowd her. "Then choose." Elena inhaled deeply. The rain against the windows sounded steady, insistent, alive. "I'm not staying because of history," she said. "I'm not staying because of protection. And I'm not staying because you've changed." She looked at him fully now. "I'm staying because you're accountable, because you stopped deciding for me, because you finally made room for my voice, even when it costs you." Luca's breath caught just slightly. He didn't hide it. "If I leave later," she added, "you won't follow." "I won't," he said. "If I stay," she continued, "it won't be exclusive to your world." "I wouldn't want it to be." Elena nodded, the decision settling into place. Not dramatic, not fragile. Earned. "Then I'm staying," she said, "for now, by choice." Luca didn't touch her right away. He waited, honoring the space she'd claimed. When she stepped closer, it was deliberate. When his hand finally rested at her waist, it was tentative, asking rather than taking. They stood there, the city breathing around them, the past no longer pressing between their bodies. Later, when Luca left for the night, as he still did, Elena walked him to the door. She unlocked it and left it open, not as an invitation, as a statement. After he was gone, Elena returned to the window. The rain had slowed, the river reflected the lights, clearly now undistorted. She understood something then, with calm certainty. Love hadn't returned because it was demanded. It hadn't survived because it was protected. It had returned because it was finally chosen by both of them, without conditions, without silence, without fear. And for the first time, staying didn't feel like a risk. It felt like truth. Time did not soften everything. It clarified it. 3 months later, Elena stood in a different city, the air sharper, the mornings quieter. Her new apartment overlooked a narrow park where trees were just beginning to change colour. She liked the honesty of the seasons here. Nothing pretended to last forever. Her life had expanded, not dramatically, not loudly, but in ways that mattered. New colleagues. Work that asked more of her mind than her patience, evenings that belonged entirely to her. And Luca. He was still present, but no longer central by force. They spoke regularly, though not predictably. Sometimes every day, sometimes after a stretch of silence that felt intentional rather than evasive. When they were together, it was because one of them had chosen the effort of travel, not because proximity was assumed. That mattered more than she'd expected. Tonight, Luca arrived just after dusk. He knocked, always knocked. Elena opened the door and stepped back without ceremony. He entered carrying nothing but himself. No gifts, no declarations, no visible armor. "You look settled," he said. "I am," she replied. They shared dinner, at the small table by the window. Simple food, honest conversation. He spoke about the ongoing consequences of his choices, the restructuring, the resistance, the losses that still surfaced unexpectedly. He did not ask her to absorb them. She told him about her work, the satisfaction of decisions made without negotiation, the quiet confidence that came from being fully informed. At one point he said, "I would have tried to protect you from this life once." She met his gaze. "I know. And now," he continued, "I see that protection would have been theft." The word landed cleanly. After dinner, they stood near the window, the city lights scattered below them. Luca did not touch her. He waited. Elena reached for his hand. The gesture was small, intentional. "I want you to understand something," she said. "Staying doesn't mean permanence. I understand, and leaving wouldn't mean failure." "I know," she nodded. "That's why this works." He smiled then, not with triumph, not with relief, but with something steadier, acceptance. Later, when Luca prepared to leave, Elena walked him to the door. She didn't leave it open this time. She closed it, gently, deliberately. After he was gone, Elena stood for a moment in the quiet of her apartment, listening to the building settle, to the city exhale. She felt no ache, no panic, no familiar pull towards self-erasure. What she felt was alignment. She had not returned to an old life. She had not reclaimed a lost love. She had built something new from truth instead of longing. Elena understood now that second chances were not about undoing the past. They were about refusing to repeat it. And Luca, flawed, accountable, still learning, was no longer the axis of her world. He was a choice she made freely. That was the difference. That was everything.
Now, let the story slowly fade away. Listen and enjoy this gentle music. Close your eyes, relax your breathing, and allow the soft piano and the sound of water to guide you into a deep, peaceful sleep. There's nothing else you need to do. Just rest.